Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking into the best Houston sports podcast. And we're veering away from sports for this one because I'm pumped to bring in a guy I've known since he was in diapers, who's a native Houstonian, singer, songwriter, recently named Memphis Songwriter of the Year. Joining me is my friend Brian Blake, who will be performing in Montrose on Friday and in Galveston, Conroe, and Livingston in December. He's releasing his first ever album entitled Book of Life on November the 18th. Can you believe it, Brian? An album.
I cannot believe it. It's been a long time coming. Thanks for having me on today.
Before we get to the album, I got to tell the listeners how we know each other, because this is hard to believe, but we got to go back to the 70s when I started going to school with Brian's older sister, Polly, here in Houston when I was either 2 or 3 years old. So I've literally known Brian since he was born, since he's roughly 7 years younger than me. Our families were so close that 3 separate summers we took vacations together. It was me and my 2 sisters, Brian and his 2 sisters. We all matched up in age, so it was very similar to the Brady Bunch, kind of. And right. Twice we went to Florida, finishing with a stop at Disney World. And once we drove through Tennessee, including a stop at the World's Fair. I doubt Brian remembers much. Do you remember much? You weren't even 6 years old when we did all that, right?
The only thing I remember about any of that was getting stuck in a hotel room with Farrah. Like we locked ourselves in a bedroom, and that was about it. And I think maintenance had to be called, and we were all of like, I don't know, a few years old or something like that. So,
yeah, that was Farrah's my youngest sister, and he's about the same age as Brian. And it was a hotel in Disney World, and they were in tears because they had somehow locked themselves into it. The hotel had to like break through the window to get us. They couldn't even open the door themselves, so they had to break through the window. It's a great family story. And,
right.
and you know, your family moved to Memphis when you were little, but a couple of major Houston ties I got to mention. Number one, got to start off with your grandfather, Joe, from Liberty, Texas, competed regularly at the Houston Rodeo Barbecue Cook-Off. And I say competed, Brian, but he was a legit barbecue world champion, right?
Yes, he won the 1976. He was one of the first winners of the Houston Livestock and Rodeo Barbecue Cook-Off. Now it's a huge event. He was one of the pioneers of barbecue catering, had one of the first barbecue pits on wheels. You know, the stuff that he kind of set the bar with way back in the 70s and the 80s are the reason they have big, huge rolling, you know, equipment that people can cater. He could cater for 500 or 5,000 people. He cooked for the Oilers, the Longhorns, senators, governors, everybody. So he was legit.
Yeah. In fact, on your YouTube channel, you've got the video from back in the 1979 when he's on the Dinah Shore show.
Right.
With Dinah Shore was basically the Ellen DeGeneres of her time. And he was there with Bob Barker and Gil Gerard from the original Battlestar Galactica and Robert Guillaume. And so just an incredible video that I noticed you put up in the pandemic. But yeah, he's a big deal. And, you know, I know you guys were really close too, right?
Yes, we were. Loved him very much. He died when, he died in 99. So I think I just turned 22 or was just about to turn 22 when he died. And, you know, he was only 74, but he was larger than life and left a big impact on me and, you know, a lot of other people too. His funeral was at the Methodist Church there in Liberty, and it was standing room only. And I counted in the little guest book, there was more than 400 names that showed up, including just some pretty important people, you know.
Wow. Got to throw in a couple of other Houston sports ties with your family. Your sister, Polly. Hey, Polly is a huge Auburn fan. I know she's going to be watching this. She's a proud alum, so we've messaged back and forth a lot this past year with Jabari Smith coming to the Rockets, and so excited about that. And this is even a better story. When I was in high school in the 80s, your dad, Ron, who was still is a huge baseball fan, was actually doing stat work for the man who practically invented analytics, Bill James. It was for his original baseball abstract books, and I helped your dad out with that. And your dad said, hey, ask Brian about his extraordinary baseball career. He wants me to ask you about your great baseball career.
Well, my baseball career lasted maybe one season, and what I remember. I played little league a little bit here in Memphis, but then also I played one summer in Houston, and that was a pretty good season. It was fun, but I'm much better at that than I am at anything with a ball. So
Yeah, he said he wanted you so bad to be a baseball guy, and it was more like you had difficulty hitting the tee, much less the ball, is what he described it. I want to get back to your family's connection to the album, but just a quick reminder to everybody that's watching to subscribe, comment, and like us on YouTube. It's the best way to support the show. Make sure to catch our live Astros World Series post games and live Texans post game show this week as well. Brian, let's get back to the album because you've mostly lived in the Memphis area since you were little, but
right.
there's a lot of Texas in this album, isn't there? A lot of Texas.
Yeah, it's all Texas. Essentially, when my parents got divorced, we moved to the Memphis area from Houston because my mom she was born here, and her parents were here. So she came back here when my folks got divorced after living in Texas. She was down there close to 15, 16 years, I think, all told. And so in the summers and in the winter times, after we had moved back to Memphis with my mom, we would come stay in Houston and or Liberty with my grandparents. So, as I never really lived in Texas as a young child, only as a young child, from till I was about 2 years old. And, but I did live there in the summers and the winters. So I absorbed a lot, and I was around people like my grandpa and my grandmother. They were always out in the community, and we would be going. We had season tickets to the Astros, so we were in the Dome. The Dome is where I found out I needed glasses, because there used to be this giant Coke sign that just said Coke, and the sign was enormous. And my dad, I was squinting all over the place. My dad said, "What is it? Can you tell me what that sign says over there, that red sign?" And I was, no. And the letter C was probably 30 feet tall, and I still couldn't make up the word Coke. And so lots of ties to Texas, and I spent a lot of time there in my youth. And so when I was writing the songs for this album, when I started writing songs about my Texas family were just what came out. And so this album is kind of a concept album. It starts with my great grandparents, who were from Devers, Texas, which is just east of Liberty. Liberty's right in between Houston and Beaumont on Highway 90. And so it starts out with them and their struggles to kind of raise a large family during the Depression. And then it kind of goes through time. There's a song called Rosemary, which is about my grandparents and them during World War II as my grandfather went off to war. Songs about my dad. And the album ends up kind of present day with me and Liberty, kind of looking at how everything has changed and the people that I love are, really no longer there. My dad and some cousins are about the only ones left in Liberty from what was once a very large family. We had numbers back in the day, and the town has changed and all that. And so it's kind of a linear concept album. Mostly almost every song on the album has a direct tie back to Texas, Liberty, and or my family.
I'm going to get you to play something in a bit, but who were your musical inspirations? Which artists, got you into wanting to be a musician, and who do you kind of grab something from when you're doing an album like this? Is it just everybody that's been, connected to you over the years, or do you feel like there's some people in particular?
Yeah, I think early on, I was influenced by stuff that my parents were playing. Like there's a Willie Nelson record behind my head, and Willie was always on the stereo. I joked that when my parents got divorced, it was who got the kids or who got the Willie records, and my mom got both. And So, stuff like that was just always on, and hearing stories in those old songs like that are kind of how I've done in my songwriting, where they're they're little short vignettes, set to music, short stories, set to 3 or 4 minutes worth of music. And so Willie was a big influence early on. Groups like the band, um, Taj Mahal. I live in Memphis, so blues are a big influence on me. And that a lot of that ties into how I play and sing. And but then also, as far as like songwriting, I would classify myself in like the folk slash Americana genres. So those are influences there, or people like Guy Clark, who was from Texas, Towns Van Zandt, Lyle Lovett. He was a big influence on me in my singing, particularly. So those are kind of the big ones for me.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Willie because the last time I saw Willie was back when I lived in Memphis for a couple of years. I saw him at Memphis in May, and I actually got to see him on one stage at one side of the Memphis in May Music Festival, and then walked across the music festival to the other side that night, and Bob Dylan played. So that was a
Yeah,
pretty big one, pretty big
those are the
night.
good old days, man.
Oh
They
man,
were.
it was unbelievable, and I can't remember if I've seen Willie actually at the Houston Rodeo, but when we were kids, we'd go there all the time. Do you remember
Mhm.
going to the rodeo when you were little, seeing the musicians at all?
I don't, not at all. So by the time, because the rodeo is usually in February,
Yeah,
something like
February.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah. So by the time we moved back to Memphis, um, from Houston to Memphis, I was still pretty young, and so when that time period came along, I was in school, up here in Memphis when the rodeo came. So I never got to go to any of the big shows. My sisters did though.
yeah.
There went plenty of
It,
them.
it was like March, I think, when it would end, and I didn't
Yeah.
know if that seeped into spring break and if you'd come back here for spring break. That's
I
the only.
may have been, I may have done that, but it's not something I remember. But
Yeah.
certainly got a lot of pictures and those sorts of things in my archives.
Oh yeah, yeah. Um, well, let's do it. You've got your guitar with you.
Yeah,
Uh, can you give us a little sample from the album?
sure. Let's see. Why don't I do? We were talking about ex-wives. I can do this one about my dad's three ex-wives. uh, and this is kind of a more upbeat song on the album. But the album's called Book of Life. My dad and I were in Galveston, and we saw Ramblin' Jack Elliott play, and it was a great show. And we were Ramblin' Jack was talking about his ex-wives, and my dad said that he had, really he was married 3 times. He had good marriages, except for whatever reason it just wasn't meant to be. And so the next day we were hanging out there in Liberty, and we were just I can't we were not too far from his house. We were hanging out at this little shop area, and I had my guitar and I wrote this song. It's called Meant to Be. So I'll do it.
Sounds great.
Well, my three ex-wives are real nice ladies, but something about marriage just drove me crazy. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't meant to be. My first ex-wife was a Memphis gal, and we got together in Austin town. It was the summer of love when we got married. And although we had a real nice family, them pastel colors didn't agree with me. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't meant to be. Well, I wanted to stay, but it wasn't meant to be. ex-wife was a Cajun cutie. Lord have mercy, another southern beauty. I had good taste in women, it seems. And although she gave it a real good try, there was something about the Brady Bunch life that I don't know what it was, but it wasn't meant to be. Well, I wanted it to, but it wasn't meant to be. And then my third ex-wife was a scholarly type, a fine young woman, just my style. I found the one. Well, finally, but all honeymoons must come to an end, and so didn't this. So one of my friends, I don't know what it was, but it wasn't meant to be. Well, I tried to work it out, but it wasn't meant to be. You know, my three ex-wives were real nice ladies, but something about a marriage just drove me crazy. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't meant to be. Well, my next ex-wife, I ain't yet met her, and the saying goes, never say never, but never may come too soon. Beginning to think, because I am what I am is how I'll always be. And if the shoe don't fit, then mama say la vie. I said, baby, it wasn't meant to be. Well, honey, I'm sorry, it wasn't meant to be. But darling, don't you cry, it wasn't meant to be.
Fantastic. Love it. Yeah, no, I got to hear the Book of Life, the main song on the album, the where you got the title, I guess, from, right? Is that song?
Right, that's the title track.
Let me ask you, you're not exactly in your 20s and you're making your first, what does it mean to put out your first album right now? I mean, what does that feel like to do it at this age?
Well, you're right. I'm not exactly in my 20s, but it feels great. For a long time, I've been playing guitar since I was 12 years old, 30 plus years, and for years and years and years, I just played other people's music. So I was in blues bands and rock bands, but it was usually, or very rarely, would we play any original material. And it wasn't until about 7 or 8 years ago, maybe a little longer than that. I was with my dad. He introduced me to a cousin of ours that I didn't know we had, and who also was from Liberty, and he was a songwriter, and he had written all these songs that we were together, and he was playing them, and I was listening to them. I was like, wow, these are incredible. And my dad, he's like, well, you could try and write songs too. And I had never really thought about it up until then, because I'd always just played cover songs. And so that was 7 or 8 years ago. And it's just something I've been working at. And so, no, I'm not in my 20s, but once I got a good body of work together for this album, and it's a meaningful album because it's songs about my family, it's like, well, I had initially not really, I wanted to do an album, but I was a little unsure. But some friends of mine were like, no, you need to do this. And the songs on the album, the one I just played was kind of tongue in cheek, upbeat, but there's a lot of feeling in a lot of these songs on the album. They're real personal, and they're also songs that other people can relate to. And so for people like our age, that like to listen to that kind of music, I think it's gotten pretty good reception thus far. And so the songs are meant for the listener to not sit in a bar and be talking over and, beers clanking and all that. This is songs to listen to and think about, and really absorb. And so what I wanted to do once I decided to record, was like, or what I wanted to avoid was 20 years from now, when I will be at the point where, I'm no longer working or looking maybe towards retirement or something like that. I don't want to be looking back and saying, I wish I'd recorded an album, and so I had enough people believe in me, and telling me, hey, you need to go do this. And so I did it, and there's a lot of good stuff happening as a result. So that was one of the main drivers, and it is not wanting to have any regrets about it.
Not only was the album about Texas, but it was made in Texas. You made it in Austin, right?
Yeah, I recorded the album in Austin. Walt Wilkins, who's a very well-known singer-songwriter, Texas troubadour, producer, he and Ron Flint co-produced the album. It's a very big deal for me to have the good fortune to work with those two. Not everybody gets to do that, and I'm really grateful that they took this project on, and the songs, the treatment they gave them, they understood the importance of the songs and those ties that my family has to Texas and that I have. And so they actually know the creme de la creme of Austin musicians, and just had some wonderful instrumentation to back up my guitar and my vocals. Rich Brotherton, who played with Robert Earl Keen for 20 years, he played on the album. Warren Hood, who's a fiddler, he played with Lyle and Hayes Carl, and all these people have their own solo careers too. Folks like that just adding color to these stories, and it's a wonderful thing. I can't wait for you to hear it. So
I can't wait to hear it. And this Friday, you're going to be playing at Anderson Fair in Montrose, right? With Matt Harlan?
Yes, and it's a dream come true. Matt is a wonderful, widely known songwriter in the Houston area and also throughout Texas. Anderson Fair is one of the premier listening rooms, not only in Texas, but anywhere in America. It's been around since the late 60s. Lyle Lovett, Robert Earl Keen, Nancy Griffith, Townes Van Zandt, Guy Clark, Slade Cleaves, all these wonderful songwriters have come through there. Some got their start there, and it's a place where you come to listen to the music. You can hear a pin drop in there, and I was very fortunate to have the opportunity to play there on Friday with Matt. It's a bucket list kind of gig, and it's not a gig; it's a show. It's going to be a incredible night. So,
and if they've missed it there, where can they see you in December around here?
Gotcha. So in December, I'm coming through on December 15th, I think, which is a Thursday. I'll be playing in Galveston at the Old Quarter Acoustic Cafe, another very storied listening room and bucket list. So on Friday, I'll be playing in Conroe. That would be December 16th. And that'll be at that'll be at the Corner Pub in Conroe. And then Saturday, the 17th, I'll be playing in Livingston, December 17th. That's at a place called Across the Tracks, another listening room. It's a really cool venue, just in a small Texas town, not too far from Houston. And then on Sunday, I'll be playing in Austin at the New World Deli, and then I'll also have some more dates that I'm doing, not only in December, but that I'm looking at doing next year too. So I plan to, now I've got the album out, make Texas, East Texas, Central Texas, kind of put that on the rotation, and hopefully get to play there multiple times a year.
It drops November the 18th. Is that right?
The album comes out. It'll be on all the streaming platforms. It's an independently produced album, so what I can say is that you can stream it all day long, but that will never get me anything. And the reason is because, like on Spotify, they pay, for instance, a friend of mine had 1 million streams, and he made about $3,000 out of 1 million streams. And it's real hard to get 1 million streams. And
yeah.
But you can buy the CD on my website. You'll be able to get it on Bandcamp, brianblake.net, or just look up Brian Blake. And that is a way to, it's not only for me, but for other independent artists who aren't like big stars or on a record label. You buy direct, you go to the shows, you buy the merch, that sort of thing. That's what keeps this kind of stuff going. It's not the Spotify's and Apple Music and stuff like that.
Well, before I go, got to say hello to Linda, your mom, and Allison.
Yeah.
And
I'll tell her you said hi.
And I got to tell everybody to come out and support one of Houston's own products, Brian Blake, the album Book of Life. Can't be more impressed with your singing and songwriting, Brian. It's hard to believe the same kid I wrote Pirates of the Caribbean with can create such heartfelt poetry, and incredibly proud of what you've done, and really excited for the next couple of months for you. Thanks for taking the time in a busy week, and maybe you can play us out with something before we get going here.
Okay, I'll do that.
Anything you want.
All right. I'll just go out with Move On JD. I'll do kind of the first verse of that. It's a song about a World War II veteran that was there in Texas, in Liberty. And it's a pretty cool song, I like to think. So. JD came home with a Purple Heart, lost his good arm in the war. He spent his days down off Beaumont, behind Old Man Wiggins' store. He'd smile at all of passers-by as he nursed on an ice-cold beer, till the police came and would run him off. They'd say, JD, it's time to move on from here. They'd say, move on, JD. Move on from here. Well, you can go anywhere you want, but you just can't stay here.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Hey, you can support the show by subscribing on YouTube and commenting on the videos. Listen to Houston Sports Talk on Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, and Google. Don't forget to tell a friend and share our show on social media. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.